I don't know what she knows about me and how I tend to operate. I have learned more about how she tends to operate and both advantages and foibles, and that sort of that's a good example of from a distance respecting the conflict type, but then as that distance is closed, becoming more and more problematic. The problems that I ran into is the feeling that, and she's, you know, paragon, paragon human being, great person. But from my view, it always felt the ESTJ always feels like a disciplinarian or like a coach, like a sports coach. They always feel like that, and I don't respond well to that at all. I've never responded well to that because it feels highly invasive. I don't like it when this other person comes in and seems to think that, like the notion that someone would come in and say, I see that you have potential and now I'm going to help to exploit that. Oh, sorry. I mean, not exploit. I'm going to help you develop that. That's how I view it, right? With that sort of bitter irony, or not irony, but that bitter sense of humor where it's like, I don't want you, like, who made you decide that you knew what my potential was and now you want to develop it by getting me to do more stuff? Like, I don't, it doesn't, I don't respond well to it. Also the notion that I know that they're out there, but I haven't met personally any ESTJs who liked every time, and it's not just ESTJs, but it's very often that when they'll ask my major and I'll say philosophy, and it's like every single time there's this sense of if you can't do something with it, which what that really translates to is not you can't do something with it, but if you can't do something that I'm familiar with already, or that is sort of externally measurable in the ways that I've already chosen but don't realize. If you've chosen philosophy as a major, then in my mind that instantly means, oh, you aren't going to really do anything important like in the real world, because I can't measure philosophy. That's not in the zone, and that's very frustrating, because obviously I'm looking at it from a skewed perspective. But for them, and it's frustrating in that way that is very defensive, because I know that I'm not very good at like giving practical advice through typology, and I noticed that I'm sort of sensitive to that. There's this part of me that feels like I'm inadequate there, but I don't want to be adequate there, because the reason I'm inadequate is because I have these essential philosophical problems with it, because my advantages come at the expense of the pragmatism. And for the ESTJ, it seems to go the other way. I can't be inside of the ESTJ's mind, but they recognize that they have a certain bankruptcy of understanding or appreciating seeing the deeper underlying currents, because their strength comes from being extremely skeptical of somebody coming in and prophesying, as it were. They're skeptical of that because their tertiary NE sees all of the different possible views, and their recourse is to SI, what is their subjective reality, that they're going to hold on to and sort of trust, despite all of this nonsense that's going on around them. And that's just not how it is for me. So it's what was I talking about? But I think they perceive and are sensitive to the fact that they feel, or can feel that way when in the presence of an INFJ or even an INTJ, that they are sort of bankrupt of any deeper, and not just deeper, but that kind of deeper perception that is able to see what's going to come and somehow almost always be right, and just to be able to take a snapshot of what's going on and say, okay, this means this. Go. Like they struggle with that aspect of the perception, which is a part of why I don't think you often find them in philosophy. I don't think that's always the case, but they always strike me as being sort of like disciplinarians. They want to see the work put into it, and they want to see that this thing means something. In the way that they think that it'll mean something. Usually that means, okay, are you making money? Right? Like, are you making money? Are you gaining muscle mass? Are you losing weight? Are you, do you have these external things that show this off? And it's like, frustrates me. Anyway. So that doesn't really answer the question totally. But as to what a relationship between them would be like, but I see a lot of the problems that could arise with sort of these fundamental differences, because the benefit though is that, unlike say a supervision relationship or a benefit relationship, at least it's a mutual thing. They're both sort of slightly intimidated by each other and are resentful of that, or are frustrated by each other's talents. And so at least it's a mutual thing, and it's not one person without realizing it is in a position of power over the other person who resents it, because that, I feel like that's almost worse, like in say a supervision relationship. Because that's a lot harder to resolve, and also you're not on the same power level, and so it's much easier. It's harder with a conflict relation to actually. You can harm the other person, but it's always going to end up being mutual because the other person can fight back. And in a supervision relationship, the attempts to fight back, if I understand right, will generally fling off, except unless they're really low punches, but it's not an equal fight. It's not the same kind of things going back and forth. But with conflict, they are equal, and they're equally intimidated to a certain degree by each other, and so that there is a benefit to that in that both types can have mutual respect, and that's harder in one of the non-mutual relationships like supervision or benefit. And so there is that to keep in mind. But it is a relationship it's a relationship of mutual respect, but that is very easy for resentment or not even resentment, but just frustration to creep in. The ESTJ will think that the INFJ, like a good example might be, you look at Spinoza, and what he comes up with is this beautiful idea, and he works as a lens grinder. And it's like the ESTJ is like, what's the point of your substance idea? Like, it feels like you're just kind of pontificating, and it doesn't really do anything for anybody. Like, that's how I would conceptualize the difference. So anyway, that's what I have for that question. And we are almost to the end here. 2 more questions. To be continued 2 says, well, I'm glad you like my channel. Thank you. Do you have any more projects along the lines of Starry Laughter in the works? Not at the moment. I guess I kind of, because I did that as an experiment, I'm honestly still kind of waiting to see the reception, even because the reception has so far been, compared to other things that I've done, so relatively small that it's sort of like, it's been a good reception. It's just, it's small. Anyway, that also, comes from sort of artistic inspiration for me to try that out. And I have other ideas in mind. Originally it was going to be much longer, actually, but I got to a point, and I honestly felt, it wasn't just I got tired, I honestly felt, no, this is, because I kept going, but then I decided, no, I'm going to set the stuff that I did afterwards aside, and I feel like this is already good. This is good as it is. But I had originally planned for it to be much longer and for it to have multiple parts to it with multiple figures that I would sort of engage in these philosophical discussions with, but none of that's really taken fruit right now. But, it's also because I'm always kind of sensitive to know, what did people really think of the first one that I did? That Starry Laughter. I've gotten some feedback, but it's almost kind of, I'm curious to know whether everything was as effective as I thought it was, if there were things that were effective that I didn't realize were effective. And I don't know if there hasn't been a whole lot of feedback in that way, so it's almost like I'm not quite sure what I would want to do for another one. I mean, obviously I should do what I think would be best for me to do, but I still would be interested to know. But anyway, so the answer is no, not right now, but that's definitely not to say I wouldn't do something more in the future, because I do have feelings and things like that. This is the final question, ladies and gentlemen. It is submitted by Goku the Super Saiyan Demon 2. I love it. I love it so much. Okay. Do you have any interest in the Big Five aspects test? I have talked about Big Five a bit. I'm an INTP and I've paid $9.95 to take the test from understandmyself.com, which I believe is the Jordan Peterson site. I believe so. I would look it up here, but I don't have internet in the parking garage. It's the way I'm looking at these questions is I copied them into a Microsoft Word document before coming out to the car, because I knew I wouldn't have internet connection in the car, but I wanted to do it out here. And then it tells me the results. What do I think of it? I've already talked a great deal about it, but I will point out that 0 percentile conscientiousness, which translates to, if we're going by my attempt to make it, not just make it, but what I think is an honest lining up with the Myers-Briggs, to have no conscientiousness means you have no judgment, meaning you're perceiving. First percentile agreeableness means very little sign of feeling, meaning that you're a thinking type. It's the other way around. 22 percentile extroversion, implying that you're more introverted on the scale. 92 percentile neuroticism, which neuroticism is a new term they've introduced that doesn't correlate as far as I'm concerned. And 97th percentile openness to experience, which I think has a correlation with intuition, at least as Myers was testing for it. So what your initial I guess I kind of did just answer the question for you, because that's what I think the lining up is. I think that conscientiousness as a trait aligns with judgment, and therefore if you don't have a lot of conscientiousness or you're not very conscientious, you are perceiving. If you are rather agreeable, you are feeling, but if you're not, then you're thinking, and so on. So but neuroticism, I think, and actually that's what you put here. You kind of already figured it out, which sort of at least figured out how I would view it, which shows that it's not really rocket science. That it's an evolution of the MBTI. You plagiarists! Just kidding. I know that's not the case. I'm trying to make jokes, but I'm not very good at making these kinds of jokes, because I keep on saying, just kidding, I'm not really joking. And it's like, I need to be more dry and sarcastic, but it's very hard for me. But yeah, I don't believe that neuroticism, I believe neuroticism is sort of the new trait that they've introduced. And I'm under the under the impression that, like what judgment and perceiving was for the original MBTI, neuroticism now kind of is for this MBTI, and that it's the weakest trait. It's the most unstable, which is funny because it's neuroticism. So it's the one that, because it's new. Anyway. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. I mean, are we really done? There were one or two that I need to, I'll be handling off of this, as it were, hopefully. But I think that's it. My goodness gracious. When I do a live stream, I give you far more than you ever asked for because I'm compulsively like, I have to answer all the questions these poor people have given me. But thank you for those of you who I hope you have found use from the answering of the questions. I will be trying to create the table of contents in the description below. But I will see you whenever the next video is. Thank you.